Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today. As you can see, we're taking a break from the holiday chat to talk about Endling, Extinction is Forever, because it's a game I just got finished playing on my stream. If you want to see how that goes, the first stream VOD is, what's it called? I can't remember, hold on. It's not Fawn and Minty Love, it's the other one. It's Meet My Children, Pinky, Tuft, Mortimer and Tanuki, Tanuki. And then the second one will be uploaded next week, You Go Forward But I Cannot, but you can see it on Twitch. But anyway, hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow, it's 5:31 PM on Sunday, September 8th, 2024. So if you want to see a playthrough of Ending Extinction is Forever, check them out. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to be talking about it today. I warn you before I get to any real sort of spoilers, I think, in the game. There's not huge, there's only a couple things that really is spoiled, because its plot is sort of more existential is not the right word. It's more just sort of existent. It just kind of happens. It's I will say it's a rather predictable plot in my mind, but that doesn't mean it's bad or any worse. So what do I think of Extinction, Ending Extinction is Forever? I think it's a good, fun, experience and game. I think actually it's got a surprisingly satisfying and fun sort of gameplay loop at its core. But the entire premise is you are a mother fox. You have 4 little kits who you are basically trying to look after. You're trying to feed. And you have a day-night cycle where, well, it's actually, I guess it's evening and night cycle or whatever, where in the evening you will go try and find food. And at night you need to return home in time, otherwise, you might starve. It's not like an instant game over, which is one positive. But yeah. Excuse me. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic sort of world, where humanity is is on its last legs, where they're sort of destroying the environment, and yeah, you're just sort of trying to figure out how to survive in that environment. That's the basic premise of it. Mechanically, the gameplay loop is a sort of survival game. You have basically a hunger bar which is constantly depleting. You go out basically hunting for food, but there are obstacles in the way. There's things like hunters which are trying to trap and capture you. There's a scavenger who is trying to capture you and get your pelt. Is that the word? And really, there's other environmental birds of prey trying to snatch your kits away. And this is mild spoilers. Well, right at the beginning of the game, one of your kits gets snatched by the hunter very early on, and a big sort of premise is you trying to find them in time, and all while trying to balance his hunger, because as apparently your kits can actually die if you don't feed them in time. The hunger bar is constantly depleting, and you basically constantly try and find food to give to them. I would say the game difficulty is actually not very high. I can't remember if I chose maybe I chose I don't know if there were difficulty modes or something. If not, it certainly feels there could be easily just make your hunger bar deplete faster or something. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a boring hunger, or have some food be not as replenishable. But I basically was never really in any danger of running out of food to eat. I don't know if maybe I just ended up playing well, or maybe I just made it did it quite efficiently. Who knows? But yeah, there wasn't really much of a danger of hunger. I only died once throughout the entire thing, and that was actually just straight up a huge mistake on my part. But basically you can fight the scavengers once, you can't fight them twice. And I basically just navigated wrong and was let's see if I can actually get past the scavenger while injured, and the answer was no, you can't. So I could have gone through without dying, but that's not the point. But what Endling really is at its core principle, I think, is a game which is about sort of conveying this concept, is conveying this message about needing to do better to help and protect our world. It's a game with a very heavy environmental sort of theme to it, and also the sort of theme about there's the primary theme, in my opinion, is about preserving the environment, taking care of the environment, and how humans are damaging it and destroying it through destructive choices. Things like factory industrial waste or deforestation and stuff like that. But there's also like a secondary sort of like underlying theme about like protecting family, like parenthood, I suppose, and doing what it takes to survive. In a sense, like that's like a soft theme, because it's like baked into the mechanics, but it's not as explored. Well, it's not as like told environmentally throughout the story. It's more like a reflection of the mechanics itself, isn't it? Not saying the theme isn't there, but it's definitely there and reflected in some of the characters you meet. But it's more like it takes a backseat to this environmental theme. And it does a lot of cool things with this environmental theme. Like, it's on a day-by-day basis, and it seems like it's on a timed day basis. Like, the entire game takes 30 days, I think, from start to end. I don't know if that's immutable or whatever. Maybe there's some variance, who knows. But it's cool. One of the coolest things I thought about the game is seeing the environment change as days go by. Like, you start off in like a pretty wooded area, then things get destroyed about the place, etc., etc. The environment changes, things get unlocked, new passages get opened up because of it. The one which sticks to my mind, and now I'm going to say all spoilers are basically off for this game. So if you want to play the game, if you want to watch a game, go do that, come back. No worry there. But I was going to say that one thing that really sticks in my mind is that when you get to the second lair, the second home, your second base, it's a huge like wooded forest land or something. There's like berries aplenty of that sort of thing, and forest creatures about the place which you can easily hunt. But as the days go by, you see more and more trees are cutting down. Like a few days in, you see there's like a deforestation, sort of like a logging companies come in with like machines to cut stuff down, and by like 3 more days or 5 more days have passed later, the entire forest is cut down and everything has been stripped away. And it's seeing that environment change, it's very like good sort of storytelling in that sense, because already at that point you're like, I need to protect my kids to survive, and at that point you're just like, the forest is dying, I need to go find another place to live, otherwise I'm going to run out of food and shelter at this point. So it does a really great job of like the sort of evolving environment to help support the themes. Like, that does double duty of supporting the themes of like, oh, the environment is changing, humans are destroying it, but also double duty of like, if you're of the mindset, I need to protect my children, I need to find a better, safer place to live. And there's a lot of things in there which I feel like mechanically could have lended better, could have actually like lended more to the storytelling. One of the reasons that food was so the hunger was basically never an issue is because there's actually quite a lot of trash bags over the place where you can feed like trash to your kits, and there's basically no negative repercussions from what I can tell. I think it would have been good if there were negative repercussions, like maybe your kit gets sick or something from eating trash all the time. I don't know if that actually necessarily happens or not, but or like you get diminishing returns over how much they feed. Like, the only negative repercussion is if you're digging in trash, sometimes you might get like a trash bag on your head and then you have to mash A buttons to get out of. But that quick time event is so easy, there's like no danger whatsoever. And that's like a sort of overarching thing, I think, mechanically in the game, which I think sort of betrays its themes a lot, is the fact that you never really feel like you're in that much danger. And the times you are in danger, it does feel like I can understand why. Okay, so there's 2 points here. One, this game, I think, I don't know, like, it's meant to be environmental storytelling, I think, so it's focused on the story and the narrative it's trying to give, but I think it definitely errs on the side of it's way too easy, like, as a mechanical game. And the mechanics of it, like, it's got this theme of like, how am I gonna like find enough food for my kids to survive while the environment's being destroyed around me. But like, really, there's a lot of food and it's very easy, at least I found quite easy, to balance the story, like hunting out for your other 4th kit who's gone missing and getting enough food for your children to survive. Even easier when you get the badgers helping out at the end, because you can just teleport to places where you haven't been for ages, get some food you haven't missed or hasn't explored or you left from last time, and come back easy getting food. The badgers also give you food towards the latter half of the game, just every single day. That's like, you have an abundance of food. Like, in the last few days I was basically going home with like full stomachs and excess food just about the place. So it would be nice. So one, the game feels like it's too easy, but I understand why they erred on the side of easy, is because it's a narrative game. Like, this is going to be played by people, like, the target audience are not necessarily optimizing gamers, etc, etc. So of course you want people to be able to get through it. And actually, I read some of Steam guides, and there's actually quite a few people saying they found it too difficult some of the days, which is fair. Like, that's obviously pointing to evidence being like, yes, they made a right decision on the difficulty then. If anything, they should have made it easier to make it a more narrative experience. But I do think that maybe there might have been difficulty options. I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but if there were difficulty options, and I retract my statement, if they're not difficulty options, there should be difficulty options, because I could have, like, I feel like the message gets across best when it's like, I'm at a constant threat. I'm like, I have to balance, like, do I try and find out where my fourth kit is, or do I try and find and hunt food for my current existing living children? Because I can't do both. Or I'm like, I want to go into that aim, and then we sort of go into a third point, which I'll start here, but do I go into this dangerous area because there's a lot of food there, that's where the scavengers are, I steal from the humans, but I have a good chance of, like, dying, etc. The thing is, dying is not that big a deal in this game because it resets the day. It would be a much bigger deal if the kits counted as your lives in the game. They already count as your lives of a hunger meter. If you get caught by a scavenger twice, they should take one of your kits or something. And then the game continues on, because it's a big thing with these sort of survival games that, like, what you have to do, you have to make a choice in a survival game. If you die in the survival game, you run out of resources or whatever, you mismanage your survival, what do you do? And in most survival games, that's it. It's hardcore, game over. Your character is dead. That's it. But you can't do that in this game because this game is primarily a narrative-based game. If you did that, people wouldn't see the narrative. Most people get quite frustrated and be like, well, I'm not going to restart the entire game from the beginning. Rightfully so. So they, obviously the best you can do is restart the day. But that's not really that much of a consequence. Like, it doesn't carry the impact of being like, ugh, like, this is a really tough decision. That's something I want to avoid. It's something I'm like, ugh, I want to avoid because that's just a nuisance, if anything, really. It's like I want to avoid it not because of a narrative reason. I want to avoid it because of a meta-mechanical reason, I suppose. Which is why I'm like, it might have been hardcore, it might have been really harsh, but they should have really made the kits be like your life system. But maybe they don't want to do that because people wouldn't like that. But like, if people didn't like that, they can just like reset at the start of the day and then not do the same thing. But it brings me on to my third point, where mechanically is a shortcoming, I think, of this game. They don't give you that many options to avoid danger in the first place. One, you might be like, narratively, that makes sense. You're an animal in a human's world. How much influence do you have of a world? Okay, fair enough. Mechanically, though, that's not fun, I would say. Narratively drives over point. Powerlessness, only so much you can do. But mechanically, it feels like lacking, I suppose, in a sense. But they do give you this cool mechanic, actually, where you can mark territory, and then it would be like, okay, then the danger's going to explore that area of at nighttime, which I think is a fantastic mechanic, because now you sort of like make evaluation. You see where the marking is, and you go, okay, like, is this a place I want to explore? If so, I can't mark this place because then it's guaranteed that a scavenger or thrower is going to be here. But if it's not, or if you make evaluation where it's worth it, like where I mark this place, and then I'm just like, okay, I'm going to not explore this area come nighttime, I'll go explore somewhere else. You had to make this sort of like balance, and I think that's when the game's like at its best, when I'm making these tactical decisions. Like, the places I should mark should be places where it's easy to get food, or get a lot of food, because then I'm just like, okay, I'm trading off getting this food, getting the easy like pathing through this day for guaranteeing not having to deal with a thrower. Or I could not mark it, get the food, and then also have to deal with a scavenger or thrower that day. That's how it should be, in my opinion, and that, I think, sells home a point of like trying to make these sacrifices and trying to get this sort of eternal impossible balance going, in my opinion. But there's not a lot you can do otherwise. There was one opportunity where I found myself caught between a scavenger and a hunter, but there's not really a lot I could do in that situation, because for one, there's nothing I can really know coming. Like, there's nothing I can do to like alert myself. Like, I can't tell one of my kits to hide out and alert me if they see the scavenger or something. I can't like set traps. Not saying I should be able to. I am a fox at the end of the day. But like, mechanically playing it as a player, I'm just sort of like, I feel like I didn't have any agency really in it whatsoever, and I reacted, and then it was just like, okay, well, what do I do? My only choice is I had to run through one of them and just take the hit, which is fine mechanically. Like, that's a valid, like, take out the story, that's a valid decision to make, and you would do that every time, being like, I have no other decision. Okay, health points are a resource, take the hit, run through and escape. But narratively, I feel like there's a weird incongruence there, where it's just like narratively, the best decision for me was not to do any sort of planning, not to hide, not to evade or anything. It was just I have to run through and tank one of the hits. Just it feels weird, I think, narratively. That was the choice that maybe I didn't have to make, but I did end up making. But yeah, that and like negative repercussions for feeding my kits trash every day probably should have been a thing, in my opinion. But maybe that makes it too hard. As I say, that's why I feel like there should be some sort of difficulty options here, because that like they probably didn't realize this, because it, again, narrative game first and foremost, I think. But the mechanical loop of that game is actually quite fun, and I think there's a certain sense of satisfyingness to it because of your sort of just like running and everything's in these big loops and the way it's demonstrating of these camera angles. It sort of reminds me of this game, This War Is Mine, which I've played a little bit of, but not much, where you're like a civilian trying to survive war and you had to make these difficult decisions here and there. That's what like I think the game does pretty well, to be honest. I think it's also really cool to see your kits learn new abilities, and it's like growing stage by stage. I would like to have seen the game go on for maybe a little bit longer. To be perfectly honest, I felt like it was definitely like cut down in its prime a little bit. Like I feel like it was still sort of riding the high of like this is like the big moments and stuff like that. But I understand why it didn't as well. Like maybe it would have dragged on too long otherwise. Story wise, I think there's like some nice like little touches here and there where you can find like friendly people who are willing to help you. You can find people who you think are friendly but actually aren't friendly and actually trying to hunt you. Someone who you think is unfriendly and then eventually becomes friendly with a hunter, and the scavengers who are just hunters all throughout, who are just like trying to kill you from beginning to end. There's a lot of narrative going on where you can see like how human choices is actually destructively, negatively impacting the environment, like the industrial waste that they're pouring in, which eventually pollutes the entire first area you're in, so you have to move. But I think it was also cool to see the sort of like survivors like in the camp at the end, sort of just like standing around, and the hunters being a part of the hunter himself being a part of it, where you find out, oh, the hunter only caught the kit because he wanted to keep his daughter company, because the daughter really wanted one, and then the daughter eventually passes, and at that point you can hunt down the hunter once again by tracking him, and he sees it, and you see the character growth of a revelation being like, I lost my child, I shouldn't deprive you of your child, and lets the kit go. And it's a really nice sort of like sweet tender moment, to be honest, and honestly works really well. The Badger family is also a really sort of touching thing. I can't remember it like super well. I thought the Badger parent died at some point, but the Badger parent, maybe there were two Badger parents and one of them died, I can't remember. But anyway, the other Badger parent having like two Badger cubs, and then I think they both eventually end up dying. When a Badger becomes your friend, you know, at first being an enemy and territorial, and then you sort of like work together to help each other, and it's really cool. It'd be nice to, I guess we did help the Badger. I was gonna be like, it would be nice to help the Badger but we actually did, because we set the Badger free from a trap, and we also rescued the Badger cub in the first place, which you don't have to do, which is fair. Mechanically, oh, there's also another small mechanical thing that I basically sprinted at full speed at all time and just like left my kits behind, and they're basically immune and they just caught up. So I guess it would have been more frustrating if they weren't like that, but narratively feels a bit weird, but I'm willing to let that one slide, because otherwise I think the obverse is far too annoying. The cutscenes are really sort of cute to see the kits grow up. The final cutscene, the second last cutscene I suppose, with the water and the flooding, felt really weird. Because it felt like an end, but it wasn't an end, to be honest. It was like a precursor to the end, which I guess I get. But like I feel like what it should have done, that should have been the transition to the final chapter. The final chapter should have been like this doom and gloom where it becomes like really difficultly impossible to survive, almost. And then you have this like the ending cutscene of, very tragically, mega spoilers, the mother fox dies and the baby Badger cub dies, and then at the end the Badger parent takes and looks after your kits instead, because the Badger parent lost a child, the fox children lost their mother, and then it's just sort of like, but they still need to continue onwards. It's very sweet, honestly, and it's incredibly telegraphed. Like you can tell it's coming. Like this game, like I don't know why. I guess because it feels so sad, oppressive. The atmosphere, you can tell it's going to have a sad ending, right? I mean, it's called Extinction is Forever. Like, what else would it be? And it's out of direct consequences, I suppose, of a human actions, which ended up destroying the entire environment. Well, kind of, actually. I feel like that's what it should have been. Is it should have been a direct consequence of, like, there is no food. The fox mother, like, ends up giving her food to the kids or whatever, and then that's, like, how the sort of sad ending goes. Because that feels like a more consequential thing of the industry choices of polluting of the environment leaves them without, like, a place to live, etc., etc., and no food. But then having it be the ending of the scavenger shooting the fox kind of, like, adds a weird layer of detachment to that, because it's like, oh, they only exist because of a dystopian thing, because of what the choices of humankind made. When really it's sort of just like, it more frames it of like, oh, this villain throughout this game shoots you, right? I don't know, I feel like it lacks that punch because it's not as directly tied with the destruction of the environment. But I guess it's harder to put it off otherwise, but still. But, you know, I should the game have a happy ending is also an interesting question as well. Because I'm not sure if it's a game which suffers that much from having a melancholic ending. An ending where it's like, okay, like, maybe you do everything perfectly right, and things continue and it's fine. And then it's left on this sort of ambiguous note of, like, will they survive in future? We don't know, because then it has a sort of more hopeful message of, we need to do better as humanity, but there's still hope, we can still do something, rather than the bleak ending of all is lost, I suppose. Which I think that's kind of more up to the developer to decide which one they wanted. They clearly wanted that bleak ending, but I will say, just like as a side note, I don't think it suffers from having a happier ending as well, or like a more. I don't think it should have a full-on happy ending. It should definitely be some sort of melancholy, where it's like, their future is now uncertain, but now it's sort of like pointing a finger to the audience, being like, now it's up for you to help propagate the future where they can survive, right? But they chose a sad ending, and I'm not against it. I think the sad ending also works pretty well. The only thing is just like the shooting is sort of just like I feel like it hits harder when it's more of like the environmental impact of, like, they don't have food. Like, I'm just trying to think, like, imagine the final chapters, like, from slowly starving, you can't find enough food to support the family or something, all the kids at that point, and then sacrifices had to be made. That, I feel like, sort of hits harder because it's like a slow burn. Well, this one felt like, because it was in cinematic mode, it was like, okay, well, there's a disconnect between none of my gameplay choices mattered for this narrative, but I understand why this narrative was chosen, because it had to be this way, I suppose, from the beginning, right? But there's still that sort of incongruence, which is not easy to resolve when you have a narrative plot and you have an idea of how a narrative plot needs to go, right? But I feel like the reason I bring it up is because, like, in other games, I'm sort of like, what else could you do? You know, if that's the story you wanted to write. But this one is like, it felt like there could have been an option where it just was like, it becomes just too hard to support the hunger, and then, like, you end one of the nights with no hunger, and then that's when the final cutscene can happen. Because I know normally if you have no hunger, your kids die. But, like, you can just have it in that chapter. Anytime you hit 0 hunger, boom, trigger the ending cutscene or something like that. But I don't know. On the whole, I actually quite liked the game. I think it's a very nice sort of, like, narrative experience. I think it's one of the games, like, it's a very popular thing, like these environmental narrative games where you play as a fox or something. Like Spirit of the North is another one. I can't remember what the other one's called, but there's another very popular one as well. I think this one did it pretty well. Mainly because the mechanical, surprisingly, from a narrative game, the mechanical loop was actually really quite fun. So yeah. I don't think it's a game that needs a sequel. I don't think it makes sense to have a sequel. But on that note, I guess I'll round this episode off here. Go play it if you want. It's a short experience, like 3 hours, 4 hours or something. And yeah. I think that's all I had to say on my matter. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been there, darling. Likes, comments, subscriptions, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Bye-bye for now.